Thanks so much for joining us on our Arise Church YouTube channel. We exist so that you can experience God, and we hope you do experience His presence and His power through this message. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to us on Instagram at My Arise Church and find us on YouTube at the same handle, My Arise Church.
What is up, everybody? It's good to see you. If you're new to our church, my name is Brent. I get the privilege of being your lead pastor, and we're going to continue to experience God together today. We always want to celebrate as we get started. And last weekend, we had 11 decisions for Christ in our services. Yeah. That's what it's all about right there. And I know today is going to be awesome as we continue to experience God. But I do want to remind you, next week is very important in our church for a number of reasons. It is the State of the Church address. Now, if you've been to our church for long, you know the first Sunday of every year, we do a unique, what I call State of the Church address, where we look over last year, see what God did. It's always so much fun as we celebrate what God did last year. And then we cast some vision and talk about where we're going next year. Generally, I talk to people all the time that say that's their favorite service of the year. So do not miss next week. Also, a quick reminder, their service times change next week. So we have 8, 9:30, and 11:30 starting next week. The 8 o'clock will be a little bit abbreviated, and then 9:30 and 11:30 starting next week. So you're not going to want to miss that at all. If those things don't get you excited, I know how you guys are. The next week, we will also have our 2024 t-shirts. We are the most t-shirt driven church I've ever seen. I don't know, but we'll have those out next week. And so as we go into next year and create a new theme and a new vision for where we're going, you'll get those. And they are very cool. I've seen them. You are going to love them, and you will enjoy that. There's a guy in our church that blesses us each year with Bucks tickets for the preseason games. He has season tickets, and he doesn't want to go to preseason games because he has the season tickets. And so he has, for over a decade, literally since I've been here at the church, given me the preseason tickets. And so because of that, it's preseason, I've used it as a chance to take my boys to football games, especially when they were younger, because let's be real, I mean, a younger kid, they may not want to stay for the whole game anyway. It's preseason, it doesn't matter as much, but you get the experience of the game that way. And so a few years ago, we were going to one of these preseason games, and that particular year, it had rained like crazy. And somebody had told me about this certain parking area that I was trying to find. So I find this parking area, and you ever get in a moment where you realize you're in a bad spot, but you can't back out? Okay, so this parking area, I start to pull in this parking lot, and as I do, I realize this thing is like solid mud. And at the time, I had a Dodge Charger. It is not exactly made for mud. Come on. And so I'm thinking, oh, crap. But at this point, I've gone too far into this little parking lot to back up and get out. Like, it ain't just going to happen. So I'm like, all right. So I pull up into the parking lot, and I start to get out of the car. And as soon as I start to get out of the car, I notice this. It's mud everywhere. Now, if you know anything about me, I like white shoes, and I like to keep them clean. I was wearing a pair of silver Nikes at the time, bright silver, pretty silver, right? And so I get out of the car, and I'm just going to be real. I'm just like a sissy girl at this moment, because I'm walking around like this in the mud, trying not to get mud all over myself and all over my pretty shoes. And you see, y'all don't, come on, y'all. So I'm walking around like this, and then I realize, like, if you walk the normal way out, it's the same way that the cars drive in, and so it's just tons of mud, it's caked up everywhere. And so I thought, I found this other way, and it looked like it was more grass. And if I walk this way, then it's more grass, and you get less mud on your shoes, right? And so I have Elijah with me. He's a little boy at the time, or younger. He's probably like 8 at the time. And so I have Elijah with me, and we start walking over to get into the football game. And to get out of the parking lot, though, I realized as I walked, 'cause it was dark and you couldn't see, that there was a ditch in between like the road and the parking lot. But at this point, I've already walked all the way over there, and I'm not going to walk back. And so I'm like, all right, it's no big deal. I can jump a ditch, right? Because it looked like it's all grass and stuff. Why ain't y'all got no faith that I can jump a ditch? So the ditch is there, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to jump the ditch. So I jump the ditch. And as I land on the other side, I didn't realize it was solid mud on the other side. To the extent, and I'm not exaggerating, my 200 pounds, literally, I mean, up to here in my went straight into the mud. Like, I mean, I am 1.5 feet into the mud. And this is not the end of the story because I land like this and your body momentum is going this way because, I'm jumping, right? And so I land like this and then I land on the other side and I start to pull my leg up, but then the suction of the mud keeps my shoe in the mud and my leg comes up, right? And so now I've got like mud up to here on my leg and I turn around and there was enough lights you could barely see this, but you know how like mud, it just collapses upon itself. And so I glance back and my shoe is getting lost in 1.5 feet of mud. And so I instinctively jump down, I grab my shoe, I pull it out. It is, when I say it's caked with mud, there are multiple inches of mud around the entire shoe, including inside the shoe at this point from trying to pull it out. So the shoe is completely caked with mud. And instinctively, without thinking, it's just what I did, I thought, you got to clean the mud off your shoe. And so instinctively, now I'm on the road with 1 foot, 1 shoe, and I take the shoe and I go, bam, on the road. And mud goes whoosh, everywhere. So now I got mud all over me. I'm on the road. There's no way to help. There's no running water to clean up with or anything. So I'm just trying to wipe it down my arms. And I got mud all over me. It's on my jersey. It's on my pants, my shorts. And I got this mud. And I'm like, crap. It's solid mud going down my leg from there down, solid mud on the shoe. And so I'm like, all right, well, in my head, I thought, well, I'll go up and, I get as much off as I can. When I get up to the seats, then I'll, go find a bathroom and, try to wipe the mud off when I got a sink, right? Logical. So I walk all the way up to the stadium, all the way up to the top. That's where his seats are at. All the way up to the top, walking up there with Elijah the entire time. And finally, as I get up there, I'm like, all right, I'm going to the bathroom. I walk in the bathroom, no joke. I had mud going down my face. I didn't feel it. I didn't notice it. I don't know if it was whatever, but I didn't even know it. And I'm thinking, Elijah, you never thought to tell your dad that I'm walking around this whole stadium with mud dripping down like Elijah. Now, if y'all know Elijah, he's not short on words. You never thought that those were some particular words that should come out of your mouth to share with Dad to say, hey, you got mud coming down your face. I was so embarrassed. It's like, you got mud on your face, you big disgrace. And so I'm wiping this mud off, and at this point, I'm irritated because I'm all dirty. I got mud all over. There's no way to really clean that. You know what I mean? Got mud all over jersey, got mud on my shorts. I got mud all down my leg. My sock is completely brown. I'm putting that inside the shoe. Y'all know what I'm talking about. And at this point, I'm completely irritated at what's happening in this story. And I'm I don't even want to be here at this point. I'm just irritated. And I had a moment where it dawned on me that what I thought was a failure was actually a success, because I look over and I see Elijah, a little 8-year-old son, looking at me, and he could care less that I got mud on me. He just wants to be at a football game with his dad. The mud actually didn't matter. What mattered was right there. And I realized that what I thought was a failure was not a failure at all. What I thought was a failure actually was a complete win, because the win was I'm at a football game with my dad, or with my son. I can count on one finger, maybe 2 fingers, the times I ever went to a football game with my dad, and I'm giving this opportunity to my son. And it was actually a giant win, but I can get lost in what felt like a failure. That's right. I don't know who I'm talking to in this room, but there are some of you here today that you have tried to jump ditches. You have tried to go for something. You've started a new business. You started a new career. You went back to college. And whatever happened, it didn't seem like you were successful, and you ended up with mud on your face, and you're embarrassed, and it's awkward, and you feel like I am the biggest failure in the world. But God is going, you are not a failure. You are just trying something. You are going to move forward. In fact, the Holy Spirit was speaking to me about this message and saying, there's some of you in this room that you need to learn how to fail forward. Fail forward. So I have a whole little leadership talk, biblical message, but unique end-of-year leadership type talk to teach us how to fail forward. Now, we'll come back to this in a second, but biblically there are tons of people who failed, but maybe the most well-known failure in the Bible is Peter. In fact, we're going to talk about Peter for about 5 weeks in a row now. It's almost going to be a story of his life to some degree. But the Apostle Peter, this fisherman turned Apostle Peter, is going to have some massive failures in his life, repeatedly saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. I think there's reasons for that. I don't know that While I do agree that Peter is action-oriented, I don't necessarily agree with the traditional stance that he's just always the outspoken one. My opinion is that he's the oldest of the disciples, and therefore when there's a question or a moment that action's needed, all the younger ones are looking to him like a big brother, and he's the one that's kind of pushed into action and frequently does it wrong. That's my opinion. And so you get this picture of Peter that's kind of like that. And in the passage we're about to read, the Lord's Supper is happening, the Passover is happening, and all of the disciples are around the supper, Passover. It's a beautiful moment. It's like Christmas dinner. It's a beautiful moment as all the family is together, so to speak. And in the middle of that, Jesus says this, Matthew 26, 31 through 35, according to the Gospel of Matthew. Then Jesus told them, "This very night you will all fall away on account of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have risen, I will go ahead of you into Galilee." Peter replied, "Even if all fall away on account of you, I never will." Now he's about to get reprimanded by Jesus. "Truly I tell you," Jesus answered, "this very night before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. Peter effectively says, "I know better than you, Jesus. You don't have a clue what you're talking about, because even if I have to die with you, I will never disown you." And all the other disciples said the same. Don't miss what's going on here. It's not just that he said, he's literally saying, "Jesus, you don't know what you're talking about. Jesus, this word that you think you got is not from God, because you don't know me, Jesus. I'd be willing to die for you." Fast forward in the story a little bit further. Now they've been in the Garden of Gethsemane. They can't even stay up with Jesus. But now the guards come in, the Roman officials come in, the temple officials come in to arrest Jesus. And they're picking him up, they're arresting him. And in Matthew 26, 51 through 54, it says, "With that, one of Jesus's disciples," we know this is Peter because John refers to it as Peter. "One of Jesus's disciples, companions, reached for his sword, drew it out, and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear." Now, you should know this. This is my opinion. Can't guarantee it, but I think it's true. You don't cut the guy's ear off on purpose. You are not aiming for the ear. In fact, that's a relatively delicate, really advanced move to only cut you're talking Zorro right here at this point. I'm only going to cut off the ear. No, Peter is aiming for the dude's head. He's like, "You are not taking Jesus." He's going all like he's going, Braveheart or what have you. He's like, "Oh, yeah." And he's going to take the guy's head off. The guy moves, chops his ear off. And Jesus reprimands him. "Put your sword back in its place," Jesus said to him. "For all who draw the sword will die by the sword. Do you not think I cannot call on my Father, and he will act at once at my disposal with more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen this way?" You got to understand that Peter seems to have his own agenda because he still knows how Jesus is supposed to become the conquering hero of Israel and overthrow the Romans. He knows how it's supposed to happen. He knows better than Jesus knows, and so he's got his agenda going on here. But Jesus says, "You don't understand the scriptures, and that what's happening is actually what's going to have to happen." And then later on, Jesus is taken with Caiaphas and the high priest and the leaders who are questioning him. And it says, "Now Peter," verse 69 through 75 of chapter 26, "Now Peter was sitting out in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. 'You also were with Jesus of Galilee,' she said. But he denied it before them all. 'I don't know what you're talking about,' he said. Then he went out to the gateway, where another servant girl saw him and said to the people there, 'This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth.' He denied it with an oath. 'I don't know the man.' After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, 'Surely you are one of those. Your accent gives you away.'" Why? Because he's a cowboy. He's a country boy. "Then he began to call down curses." In other words, he was swearing, he was cussing, and swore to them, "I don't know the man." Just pause real fast right here. This is so important because I feel like, and I've said this before, and some of you have heard this, but many of you haven't. I feel like Peter gets this version of the story is completely wrong in the way that it's preached most of the time. Most of us have heard it preached, if you've been around church long, you've heard it preached that Peter was in fear of this little girl and these people because he was in fear that he's going to get arrested like Jesus. I'm just telling you right now, I don't think that's true at all, and that is not what the Bible says. That's an assumption people make about the story. This is the same Peter who just tried to chop off a Roman guard's ear. or head and caught his ear. Right? This guy's not terrified of being caught and imprisoned with Jesus. I don't think that's what's going on here at all. This is the same guy who just moments earlier in this story had said, Jesus, I'm willing to die with you. You know what's going on here, in my opinion? He's going taken Liam Neeson, and he's watching behind. Oh, you got Jesus because Jesus said he had to. Okay, there's a part of the story I don't understand yet, but I'm going to follow along. I'm going to watch from the outside courtyard. This is what's going on. He's at the fire. He's acting like he's cooking s'mores at the fire, and he's watching right over here, and he's watching what's happening with Jesus the whole time. What are they doing to him? He's waiting for an opening to once again come in with a sword and chop somebody's head off and rescue Jesus and run him back to safety. He's not scared of being found out in the sense that he's scared for his life. He's scared of being found out in the sense that then he wouldn't be able to protect Jesus. Right. He sees himself as somehow Jesus' protector, which is where this disownment is going to come from and why it's more relevant to you and I, because that's where a lot of us are at. We see ourselves in the wrong way. We understand the story in the wrong way. And when you understand the story in the wrong way, you end up doing the wrong thing with the right intention, but it's still the wrong thing. And so as he's doing this, it suddenly dawns on him. Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the word Jesus had spoken. Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. Bitterly. Peter had been saying, I know what to do. I know how this story is supposed to go. Jesus, you don't know. You think I'm going to die. I'm not going to deny. You don't know how this story is supposed to go. I know. And he's realizing that he doesn't actually know what he thinks he knows. It's kind of crazy that the story of Peter denying Jesus is mentioned in all 4 Gospels. It's one of the few stories like this that are in all 4 Gospels. Only one of them, the Gospel of John, mentions how he's reinstated, but all 4 Gospels loves to share the story of Peter's failures. And there's others other than these. These are the most common big ones that you see. All 4 Gospels. I want to give you some points this morning that are going to set you up for success in the most odd way in 2024, okay? If you're taking notes, number 1 is this. I will fail in 2024. Come on. I will fail in 2024. Now, I know some of you are Jesus and you are perfect and you're not going to fail. But for all the rest of you in this room, whether it be big fails or small fails, you are going to fail in 2024. It's going to happen. In fact, it's a good thing, as we're going to see. You are going to fail. If you are trying for anything, you are going to not always succeed in what you're trying for. If you're not trying for anything, you might actually be able to succeed in that, but then you're ultimately failing because you're not trying for anything. Are y'all with me? So if you're going to be anything in 2024, you're going to fail. But here's the problem. Many of you have been educated of how to handle certain situations. You became a nurse and you learned how to handle medical things. You became an engineer and you learned how to handle engineering things and mathematical problems. You became a carpenter and you learned how to handle wood and how to build things. But even though all of us know you're going to fail, most of us have never been trained in how to fail. We've never been schooled in how should I handle failure. So how do we handle it? Let me give you some thoughts. There's a big difference between failing and being a failure. As I start talking about failing in this message, you got to be careful that we don't start owning it and thinking that I am a failure because I failed. There's a big difference. You are not a failure. You may be failing at doing something, but you are not a failure. And if you believe you are a failure, it'll actually keep you from ever being successful. Okay? So there's a big difference between failing and being a failure. Secondly, there's a difference between the difference between average people and great achieving people is their perception and response to failure, which I would argue is a biblical perception and response. How are you perceiving and how are you responding to failure? There's basically 2 types, and we'll touch on the second one a lot, but there's 2 types. The first one is what I would call failing backwards. Failing backwards. This means that when you fail, you start pointing the finger and blaming everybody else. It's a very childish thing to do. Have you ever had your child fall off the bicycle, get up and get mad at the bicycle? As if the bicycle did something wrong, okay? Many of us, when we fail, if we fail backwards, we get up and we start blaming everybody else. Well, they did this, and this is that person, and we start blaming everybody else. And we're going to talk about this a lot in the coming year because we're going into a political year. Put your seatbelts on. Y'all know it's going to get crazy up in America. But everybody in America wants to blame somebody. They can all tell you who the problem is, but they never point at themselves. And so failing backwards would be blaming others. It would be repeating the same mistakes over and over and over. It would be imprisoned by those mistakes, so to speak, being in a cycle of just doing those same mistakes over and over and over, never learning from those mistakes. It would be thinking that I am a failure and wallowing in that. That's failing backwards. But then you have failing forward, which is taking responsibility for the failure, or at least our part in it, or what we could have done differently. It's learning from that mistake and actually advancing into the future so that you don't make that mistake again. It's persevering. It's taking new risks. It's refusing to sit back and you get up to bat again. Get on the horse again after you get bucked off. Go up to bat again after you strike out. It's going forward even in the middle of it, and that's failing forward. And we have to learn how to do that. A couple great quotes. John Maxwell said, "Your attitude towards failure determines your altitude after failure." Coach Rick Pitino says, "Failure is good. It's fertilizer. Everything I've learned about coaching, I've learned from making mistakes." President Theodore Roosevelt said, "He who makes no mistakes makes no progress." Henry Ford said, "Failure is only the opportunity to begin again." See, when you give yourself permission to fail and recognize that you are going to fail, then it allows you to start processing, how am I going to respond to the failure? And oftentimes you can learn really well how you should respond to failure, or how you can respond to failure, by looking at historic failures who you wouldn't see as failures. For instance, how many of you know the name Vincent van Gogh? How many of you have a Van Gogh in your house right now? Yeah, you're lying. It's fake. Why? Because a Van Gogh painting will sell for excess of $100 million. If you got a Van Gogh in your house, you need to sell it and tithe to the church. Because we got a building out there to pay off, y'all. A Van Gogh. Over $100 million for a painting, y'all. Did you know that he failed as an art dealer? Did you know he flunked his entrance exam to theology school when he wanted to be a pastor? Did you know that later on he actually became a missionary and was fired by the church because he was so bad as a missionary? I work in church leadership. I don't know how bad you got to be fired from a free position as a missionary. I'm just saying. In fact, in his entire life, he seldom had anything rather than failure. But now you buy a Van Gogh painting for over $100 million. All right, maybe it's not Van Gogh. Maybe it's Albert Einstein. You know him? Did you know he was an academic failure? The brilliant Albert Einstein was expelled from school at one point. Another teacher predicted that he would never amount to anything. And if you really want to feel good, this is going to help you right now. Did you know that Einstein failed his entrance exam to college? There is hope for you. I'm just saying. Einstein, E equals MC squared. Genius. Einstein failed his entrance exam to college. Just look at your neighbor and say, there's hope for you. There's hope for you. Yet nobody looks at Einstein as a failure, that's for sure. All right, let's make it more pop culture. How about Lucille Ball? She was dismissed from drama school. Y'all know Lucy. I Love Lucy. Lucille Ball got kicked out of drama school, and they said, quote, "You're wasting our time. You're too shy to put your best foot forward." Now, I know I'm like separating the age gaps right here. Some of you don't even know who that is. But if you know I Love Lucy and Lucille Ball, you know she was anything but shy. But all of us know this band, the Beatles. Did you know that they were turned down by the Decca Recording Company, and it was said the guitar music is on the way out? Wow, you talk about a mistake. How about Ulysses S. Grant? Many of you don't even recognize. He's one of the greatest Americans to ever live. He's one of the ones that doesn't get talked about as much because the South started writing history. But if Ulysses S. Grant does not lead in the northern part of the Civil War as a general, the North probably does not win the Civil War. He is an American icon and hero. Not only that, but he becomes the 18th president of the United States after all that is done. But did you know that he failed as a soldier? He was actually kicked out of the army when he was young because he was drinking too much. He failed as a farmer. He failed as a real estate agent. And when he was 38 years old, he had to run back home to daddy and work as a handyman for his dad, before becoming the president of the United States and leading as a general in the Civil War. All right, if you don't know those names, you know this one. And Antoine said to had to tell you that Michael Jordan is the GOAT, not LeBron James. Some of y'all don't even know what just happened here. My Lord. 10th grade. Many of you have heard this story. Michael Jordan gets cut from the high school basketball team. The story goes that he went home and cried afterwards. I'm not sure if was Michael Jordan the failure or the coach? Can you imagine for the rest of your life being the coach who cut Michael Jordan? You talk about mistakes. I don't know how you come back from that one. Anyway, how about Thomas Edison, the prolific inventor in history, was considered unteachable when he was young. He was told, and I quote at one point, that you're too stupid to learn anything. You should go into a field that you might succeed by virtue of your pleasant personality. In other words, Edison, you should probably be a salesman. That's what you should be. My goodness. T.D. Jakes, one of my personal favorite preachers and incredible author as well, was told that he could never write anything because he would write too flowery when he was in school. How about this one? This might be the best one of all of them. Walt Disney worked for a newspaper when he was young, and he was fired. You know why he was fired? Lack of imagination. Because Walt Disney didn't have enough imagination to work at this newspaper. Wolfgang Mozart was the famous musical compositionist and writer, and he was told by the Emperor Ferdinand that his opera, The Marriage of Figaro, was far too noisy and contained far too many notes. Because the emperor can tell Mozart how he can write music and not. Okay, are y'all with me? All of these people, all great achievers, are given multiple reasons to believe they are failures. You are going to fail. That does not make you a failure. If you stop and wallow in it, well, that's going to be looking ugly. But if you keep moving forward, you're not a failure. Did you know that the average successful entrepreneur has 3.8 failures before they find their successful company? That means I failed again, and then if you round it up, I failed again before I finally found the one company or thing to do that actually made me successful. Oftentimes the difference is just, am I going to persevere? Am I going to keep pressing forward? Am I going to keep going even though I know that I'm going to fail? It's an outlook that we have to have. I think of 1954, opening day of the MLB that year. Some of you were alive. 1954, there was a team before they were the Atlanta Braves, were the Milwaukee Braves playing the Cincinnati Reds. There were two rookies, one on each team, both coming up to bat. One of the rookies went 4 for 4. Hit all 4 of them were doubles. Now that's a good start. The other rookie went 0 for 5. Didn't get a single hit, and they lost the game 9-8. The rookie who went 4 for 4 with all doubles, you probably never heard of his name. His name is Jim Greengrass. Anybody heard of him? Exactly. The rookie who started 0 for 5, his name is Hank Aaron. What if Hank Aaron hangs up his bat and says, well, I'm just never going to amount to anything. I guess I'm just not good at this baseball thing. Look at this other guy going 4 for 4. No, you keep moving forward. See, biblical figures are constantly people who failed in different ways. I think of Eve, who ate the fruit, then gave it to Adam. Noah got drunk and ended up naked in his tent. In his defense, he was just stuck on an ark with his family for a year, but I'm not sure I blame him for that. You know, Abraham lied and said his wife was his sister. She ended up getting put in a harem. Sarah laughed at God's promises. Jacob was a liar and a swindler. Moses killed a man and had anger problems his entire life. Elijah was depressed and suicidal. Samson had problems with women. Jonah ran from God. David committed murder and adultery. Thomas doubted. Paul was a killer of Christians, for crying out loud. Listen, almost all of the great biblical heroes are people who failed. You are going to fail. It's not over. Which leads me right into my second very encouraging point for you. You will fail. And number 2, my failures will be painful. I'm just setting you up right now because most of you didn't have a class on failure in college, so you're getting it right now. What did it say there? Then Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. This failure was painful. When you fail, it's going to be painful. And you need to learn this. You will only grow to the level of your pain threshold. I'm saying that again for everybody in the back. You will only grow to the level of your pain threshold. When you will no longer tolerate pain, you will start backing up. But those who are courageous in the Lord and going after him will keep advancing forward, keep going after new things, keep trying. Even when you got mud on your face and you feel like a disgrace, you'll keep moving forward. But it's going to be painful, y'all. It's not going to be easy. Benjamin Franklin said the things that hurt instruct. Rocky would say something along the lines of, it's not how many times you get knocked down, but how many times you get back up. And this can be painful. It can be frustrating. It can be especially painful when it's not your fault. It's one thing when you do something stupid and you make a mistake and you fail but what about when it's not you? What about when the economy crashes and it kills your business? What about when things are out of your control? That's even more painful because there's nothing you can do about it. And I can tell you this, you can't always control the hand that you're dealt, but you can control how you play the cards. Here's the thing, while you do have those outside conditions, ultimately failure and success are often inside jobs. Our attitudes towards failure and success are often what either makes us or breaks us. And this is why you need this message, because you're going to fail, it's going to be painful, but you got to have the right attitude with it, or you're never going to persevere. Anybody ever heard of Dr. Samuel Langley? Yep, I didn't think so. Dr. Samuel Langley, around the turn of the century, in the 20th century, the 1900s, was a genius. He was a scientist, mathematician, astronomer. He was a professor of mathematics and astronomy. He was the director of the Smithsonian Institute and was an accomplished thinker, inventor, and scientist, like I said, was a genius of a man. And in the mid-1890s, he was considered to be the one who would create flight. He would be the man who would create the first manned flight. He was genius. He had all the PhDs in the world. He had all the resources. In fact, not only did he have the PhDs and such, in 1898, he was given a $50,000 grant or commission from the government because we wanted to make sure that we were the ones who created manned flight first. Now, $50,000 is not that much now, but in 1898, that is a fortune. And so he's given $50,000 to create manned flight. He has all of the expertise. He's got all of the knowledge and training. And now he's got the resources and everybody's behind him. So in 1898, 3 years later, he actually creates the first flight. The first flight that happens from a gas-powered, machine-powered flight without a human being in it was from Dr. Langley. And the flight actually worked. It actually was the first flying contraption like that had ever existed that was a gas-powered, motor-powered airplane. So now he's all excited because now he gets the opportunity to be the first one to make a manned flight. In October 8th, 1903, he tested his first manned flight. He called it the aerodrome. The aerodrome. And he actually put it on a makeshift houseboat. You see it right there. They put the airplane on top, and they created a catapult. Now, this sounds bizarre to us nowadays, but you got to understand, they didn't understand aerodynamics and stuff, and the research was not there, the understanding was not there. And so they created a catapult that would essentially take the airplane and throw it to get it going, to create the momentum. It's not unlike you taking a paper airplane and throwing it. They wanted to do the same thing. They did it on a houseboat over water so that people wouldn't be injured so bad if it, crashed into the water. So they created it. So April the 8th, 1903, he tested this first one. Instead of flying, it just threw it 50 yards and then crashed into the water. It's essentially like picking up the airplane and just tossing it. That's what they did. Everybody was brutal. The media was brutal. They laughed at him. They thought he was crazy and thought this is nuts. And 8 weeks later, he said, you know what? I'm going to give it a go again. I failed, but I'm going to keep moving forward. So 8 weeks later, he attempted manned flight again. He had another person in it, same exact kind of contraption. And once again, had the aerodrome. And this time, as they threw it, it actually landed in the water upside down. So the pilot was trapped upside down in the water. And the pilot barely survived. He should have died, and thanks to the rescue efforts, they were able to save him. But he almost died as the plane landed upside down in the water. At this point, it was even more of an onslaught that all of the media thought this guy was crazy. This is ridiculous. You got to understand the mindset of people back then was if God wanted us to fly, he would have given us wings. This idea of manned flight was ridiculous. This can never happen. And the media just went crazy on him. They're like, listen, anybody can take something and just throw it. We've had catapults for 1,000 years. Anybody can make a catapult and throw something. And here you are almost killing somebody in the process too. You need to stop this. This is ridiculous. And a few weeks after he was facing this fierce criticism, he came out with this saying, as he wrapped it all up. He said, I have brought to a close the portion of the work which seemed to be specifically mine, the demonstration of mechanical flight. For the next stage, which is the commercial and practical development of the idea, it is probable that the world may look to others. Let me translate that to you. I quit. I give up. I've done my part. I'm just done. This is the man who had all the PhDs. This is the man who had all the resources. This is the man. But he couldn't handle the pain of the criticism and the pain of almost killing somebody in the process. He couldn't handle it, so he quit. Meanwhile, not too long after that, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, a couple country bumpkins that own a bicycle shop that have no advanced degree, that seemingly don't have a clue what they're doing, named the Wright brothers, are going to actually be the first ones to create flight. How far can you keep pressing when it's painful? Because sometimes you might be right on the verge of making an incredible discovery, right on the verge of doing something incredibly great for your family, for your future, for the Lord. And we quit because it gets hard. You can only grow to your pain threshold. What if Michael Jordan had quit when he was cut? What if the Beatles had quit whenever they were told guitar music is on the way out? What if Edison had stopped? My goodness. And then we get this reinstatement of Peter. At this point now, Peter has failed miserably, and they've had these few encounters with the Lord after the resurrection. But one of those now, he has gone back to Galilee, which is what Jesus told them to do, and he's finally obedient. And so Jesus is back out fishing all over again. I said, Jesus, Peter's out fishing all over again. He's in his boats. Jesus shows up on the seashore. And my friend Dr. Leonard Sweet would say Jesus is a foodie because he's always around food. And so Jesus is sitting there cooking breakfast. You know, he's got some bacon and eggs. Well, he didn't have bacon because he's Jewish, but he got some eggs. He's got some fish because this guy, and he's cooking fish. He actually told us cooking fish. He's cooking fish, and he yells out at Peter. Peter realizes that it's Jesus. Peter jumps out of the boat and starts swimming to Jesus, so excited to get him, runs up to him. I have no doubt he gave him the biggest bear hug in the world, all excited to see the risen Lord. And in that moment, shortly after, you get what's referred to as the reinstatement of Peter. John chapter 21, verse 15 through 19 says, when they had finished eating, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he says, you know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my lambs. Again, Jesus said, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He answered, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Jesus said, take care of my sheep. The third time he said to them, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because Jesus asked him the third time, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Jesus said, feed my sheep. Listen to verse 18. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hand and someone else will dress you and lead you where you don't want to go. Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death at which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, follow me. I want you to see this. Typically with the reinstatement of Peter, we emphasize the first half, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, do you love me, and that whole conversation. Let me just reveal to you the second half, that you're going to go where you don't want to go. And when you were young, in other words, when you were immature, you did what you wanted. When you tried to protect me and tried to chop off a soldier's ear, or head, caught his ear. When you were standing outside by the campfire, waiting to rescue me, not realizing that's what I wanted, not what you wanted. When you were young, you were doing what you wanted, but now you are going to be in a maturity that's going to allow you to do not what you want, but what needs to be done. Come on. I said you will deny me. You said, no, I won't. Yeah, you will. I said that you shouldn't be chopping off somebody's ear, but you're going to keep trying to go after it even after that. My point in this is number 3, my failures will not be final. My failures will not be final. It is not over just because you fail. This is where the message starts to transition a little bit and gets a little bit more encouraging, because you are going to fail. It is going to be painful, but it's not over. It's not over. If you will fail and go forward with it, you can see really great things happen. I'm reading a large biography right now on George Washington. Do you realize he lost way more battles during the American Revolution than he won? He failed over and over and over, but he hung in there. With a bunch of Continental soldiers with pitchforks, so to speak, he hung in there, ended up winning in the end. How about this? Anybody, y'all may have, it's been a long time, but have I ever told you the story of my first sermon? Anybody that's a pastor in ministry typically has the same story. It's different to them, but same characteristics. My first sermon is a Saturday night. I had just given my life to Christ. I was sold out for Jesus, in love with him. Saturday night, I felt God called me to speak and preach. And I went to my youth pastor, trembling, scared to death. And I said, I feel like God's calling me to preach. And on Saturday night, he says, okay, I want you to preach this Wednesday in youth. I'm like, no training? No, send me to Bible college? Wednesday, I got 3 days. It sounds like 4, but it was Saturday night. Come on, 3 days. I'm like, all right, okay. So, man, I started studying. I got in the Word of God. I studied the Word of God. I got into concordances. I went to the library. I was looking up everything. I was listening to messages. I was going in it, and I started practicing for this thing. I had gone in my truck. I would take my truck and I would park it out underneath a street light so that I didn't, people didn't think I was crazy, all by myself. So I could still see, because back then you didn't have an iPad. And so I had my notes, and I'd sit there and I would preach in my truck. This is T.D. Jakes, Rod Parsley back then. Man, I was going in, man. I was preaching the gospel, and it was awesome. I had my points. I had my illustrations. Everybody was going to get slaved, man. Teenagers were going to be slain in the Spirit everywhere. I was going to be prophesying over all of them. It was going to be amazing. And then the night came that I'm going to present this message, and I got nervous. And if you think I talk fast now, you should have heard me back then. And I'm going 90 miles an hour in my talking. And the Irish in me would come out back then. It doesn't do this now so much. But the Irish in me would come out, and my face looked like Bob the Tomato. I'm pretty sure we should sue VeggieTales because they stole Bob the Tomato from me, because my face would turn beet red. And I'm talking 100 miles an hour, nervous, and I was preaching, and I got 7-8 minutes in, and I was done. I had said everything I had to say. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with the rest of the service. I was just done. Now, it's different, but it's the same story for virtually every preacher I know. What if every preacher after the first time said, I'm a failure, I stink at this? My goodness, you're comparing yourself to the Bishop T.D. Jakes or whatever. What? No, you fail, but you fail forward. Your failures are not final. You keep moving forward. Don't stop and wallow in them. Failure is not the end of your story. Keep jumping ditches even when you get mud on your face. Don't quit jumping. I just gave you a bunch of illustrations of biblical figures who failed. Can we just flip the coin and share the other side of it? Eve ate the fruit and then gave it to Adam, but she gave birth to the whole world. Noah got drunk and ended up naked in his tent, but he saved his entire family. Abraham lied and said that his wife was his sister, but then he became the father of the faith. Sarah laughed at God's promises, but she gave birth to Isaac. Jacob was a liar and a swindler, but he got his name changed to Israel. Moses killed a man and had anger problems his whole life, but he led an entire nation out of bondage. Elijah was depressed and suicidal, but he mentored Elisha, who did more miracles than Elijah ever did. Samson had problems with women, but he saved an entire nation in the way that he died. Jonah ran from God, but eventually led a great revival. David committed murder and adultery, but became known as the greatest of Israel's kings. Thomas doubted, but became one of the great apostles and missionaries, traditionally believed taking the gospel further than anywhere else, all the way down to the tip of the cone of India. Paul was a persecutor of the church, but became a great apostle and church planter. Wrote 2/3 of our New Testament. You will fail, but that's not the end of the story. That might be the end of that chapter, but you're just writing another chapter in the next part. Don't quit moving forward. It's not the end of the story. Now, in our church at Arise, behind the scenes, we talk a good bit about failure. In fact, we say things that when you first hear sound crazy. Anytime we hire new staff members, this is one of the hardest things for them to comprehend, because we say this openly behind the scenes. I expect failure. I expect failure. Here's the simple fact. If you are swinging for the fences, you're going to hit some home runs, but you're also going to strike out. Babe Ruth might be leading the league in home runs, but he's also leading the league in strikeouts. And I expect some strikeouts, because if you're only bunting, you can hit the ball every time. But if you're really going after it, and if you're aggressive going after the things of God, you're going to have failures. I'm not talking about moral failures and that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about an aggressiveness to go after the call of God and the will of God. I expect failure from our staff. And for the record, if we had another 2 hours, I could sit here and tell you failure after failure after failure in our church history that are awesome. Some of them were expensive. Some of them were crazy painful. Some of them I didn't know if I was going to survive because we failed, but you know what? We keep going forward. That's right. We keep running. So let me give you 3 things of failure that we tell in our church that I think would be really beneficial if you implement them in your life this year as you plan to fail, okay? Number 1, fail full speed. Fail full speed. So what are you talking about? If you are half-stepping it, you've already failed. If you are coming up to bat and you are not swinging hard, you have already failed. Go after it with everything you have, and even if you mess up, be going so fast that hardly anybody notices because you are so aggressively chasing after the things of God, the call of God, the things he's put into your heart as you can best understand them. Fail full speed. Back in high school, I played quarterback on the football team, and our coach would always yell at us, if you're going to mess up, you better mess up going full speed. You better mess up going full speed. I never did it in a game, but I remember one time in practice, I ran the option the wrong way. Everybody ran that way. Pastor Brent ran this way. And you know what? I still got like 5 yards because I was scared to death because I knew if I'm going the wrong way, I better be going hard the wrong way. If you're going for it, go for it. If you're half-hearted in it, you're already lost. Come on, as you go into this next year, you might say, I want to come to church every single Sunday next year. You may not hit that, but keep going for it. Number 2, fail fast. Fail fast. What does that mean? It means you have a short-term memory about failure. You're not going to wallow in it. You're not going to fail and sit back and just reflect on it forever. You will need to have some debriefing meetings when you fail because you don't want to keep failing in that same way. You want to learn how to not keep stumbling in the same way. So you have a debriefing meeting. That's good. That's proper. But by all means, don't just sit back. Fail quickly, fail fast. Let it go in one ear and out the other. You are moving on. You're not going to sit there and dwell on this. Be like that NFL cornerback that gets burnt on one play, but he's got to come out and cover that receiver all over again the very next play. So have a short memory. Have a fish's memory, so to speak. It's okay to fail. That's all right. You failed. Move on. Keep going forward. And that leads to number 3, fail forward. Fail forward. In other words, learn from your mistakes. When I say that I expect failure, I do not expect the same failure over and over and over. That's idiocy. You want to fail, but you want to fail in different ways as you keep trying to do new things, as you keep trying to climb into things of God and stretch for more of what God has for you, but you don't want to fail in the same things over and over. So you learn from your mistakes, fail forward, which leads me to my last point. My failures will propel me forward. Part of failing forward is actually recognizing that it's in the failure that you learn the lesson that often propels you forward. You don't believe me. Peter has his own intention, his own will, his own desires, tries to protect Jesus, ends up denying Jesus, gets reinstated. Jesus said, you think it's about your will, it's about to be about somebody else's will. Acts chapter 1, Peter goes on to lead the church in replacing Judas. Acts chapter 2, he preaches to the crowd, preaches the first sermon in the history of the church. Acts chapter 3, they heal a lame man and he preaches to the onlookers. Acts chapter 4, he testifies before the Sanhedrin. Acts chapter 5, he's beaten and imprisoned and flogged inside of the prison. Now you got to get Acts chapter 5 compared to Matthew 26. Matthew 26, nope, I'm protecting you from harm. Acts chapter 5, I'm allowing myself to experience harm. Nowhere in Acts chapter 5 is Peter pulling out a sword trying to kill somebody. He's going, God, your will, not mine. You understand what I didn't understand. I'm going to follow your will, not mine. And it's actually his failures that seems to have propelled him into a greater understanding of the depth of God's will that allows him to be able to face opposition in the book of Acts. Sometimes mistakes lead to the greatest successes. Did you know that when Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, the record player, that it was completely an accident? He was not trying to invent anything even like that. Did you know that Kellogg's cornflakes were invented when they boiled wheat accidentally and left it in a baking pan overnight and they accidentally created cornflakes? Ivory soap, that first soap that floats, was created accidentally when they actually left too much of the mixer in the thing that turned too long and air was mixed into it. And so it created a soap that float and now you have ivory soap. Do you know the paper towels were invented by the Scott Company when they were trying to make toilet paper, but the machine put too many layers in the toilet paper and they didn't know what to do with it? So now you got paper towels? Oftentimes, it's the very thing that you think is a failure that ends up being a success. It's the very thing that I thought, man, I've ruined this. And when it comes out on the other side, you're like, oh, it's kind of the opposite. It's propelling me into the future. Let me give you one last story and we're done. You'll like this one. Because everybody on Sunday wants to go to what restaurant? Chick-fil-A. You may not want to go to Chick-fil-A the other 6 days of the week, but every Sunday you have a craving for Chick-fil-A. So a Chick-fil-A story. Truett Cathy is the founder of Chick-fil-A. He passed away a few years ago in 2014. But he is the founder of Chick-fil-A. And he was a natural entrepreneur from the time he was a little boy. The story goes that in second grade, he realized that in second grade he could buy a six-pack of Coca-Cola for 25 cents, and then he could sell each bottle for between 5 and 10 cents a piece, and he could make a profit. And hence starts the entrepreneur life of Truett Cathy. Going on, he sold all kinds of other things, had a paper route and all kinds of things when he was a child. As most kids do at that time period, he entered and went into the Army, was discharged from the Army in 1945, and all he wanted to do was start a restaurant with his brother Ben. They had been talking about it all their lives. They knew they could pull it off. He's an entrepreneur. He knows he can make it work. So let's start a restaurant. So him and his brother Ben start a restaurant called the Dwarf House. It's actually originally called the Dwarf Grill, and later on it changed its name to the Dwarf House. That's what you see in the picture on the left right there. It's on the south side of Atlanta. It was immediately profitable, did very well. It was open 6 days a week, 24 hours a day. It was open every day of the week except for Sunday. Started young there. And then, in the middle of their success, the problems started to come. After the company is doing so well, Truett had two brothers, Ben and another, and both of them were in a plane, and the plane crashed, and both of them were killed in a devastating loss. In this unique moment, he not only lost his brother, he lost his business partner. In spite of that, he took care of Ben's widow and gave her the portions of the profits every year and continued to take care of her and serve her because he was first and foremost a Christian man. And then one night, because the restaurant was open 24 hours a day, one night the restaurant catches on fire and actually burns and is completely destroyed. At that time back then, people didn't have fire insurance, and sure enough, they didn't have fire insurance. They'd never thought to have fire insurance. So at this point, he's lost both of his brothers. He's lost his business partner, and now he's lost his company and his business that he loves and was doing well. In the middle of all this, he finds out that he has multiple polyps on his colon, and they say, oh, it's no big deal. We can do a minor surgery and have it fixed. And they do one surgery, it's not fixed. They do a second surgery, it's not fixed, and it takes a third surgery. And because of the surgeries and because of all he had been going through, he gets put in a hospital room where he has to sit and wait for several months as he's healing from the surgeries. And he's in a hospital room. Can you imagine in the hospital room the thoughts that would go through your mind? I'm a failure. I've lost my brothers. I love my brother. All I ever wanted was to start this business with him. And then we did, and then he passes away. And then I ruined the business by allowing it to burn to the ground without having insurance or anything. What is my future? What am I going to do? That would be a lot of our thoughts. But Truett Cathy is not a man like you and I are. Truett Cathy starts thinking about the future. What have I learned from my mistakes? What have I learned from what worked and what didn't work? And he's lying in the bed in the hospital, the story goes, when he has his $1 million idea. He thinks, you know what? In the Dwarf Grill, the Dwarf House, he said, we used to make a boneless chicken. Boneless chicken was revolutionary at the time. Chicken always had bones in it. You know, the idea of way back then to have a boneless chicken was, and he said, we made a boneless chicken, and people seemed to really like the boneless chicken. He said, what if I took the boneless chicken and put it into a sandwich? And that's why to this day, when you go to Chick-fil-A, it'll say on some of their billboards and some of their signage, we invented the chicken sandwich. Because nobody had ever done that before. And in a hospital bed, after losing everything, Truett Cathy invents the chicken sandwich. In the year 2000, they became a $1 billion company. Right now, they are roughly a $5 billion company. Because in a hospital bed, when he could have wallowed in the pain, could have quit, could have made it all about himself, could have sat back, could have quit everything and got a normal job, he said, no, I'm going to move forward. What have I got that's worked? What have I got that maybe there's something to this? And he invents the chicken sandwich. What am I saying? Your failures are not final. Dream again. Believe again. As you enter into 2024, run after the things of God again. You may have some mud on your face. You may have some pain. You may feel ignorant, but go after it. It is not over. God is calling you to jump again. Jump the ditches again. So in 2024, jump again. Just because you failed in the past doesn't mean you're going to fail in the future. It may be the very failure of the past that's going to propel you into the future. So make goals, make plans, go after them. I don't know who this is for, but I felt this so strongly as I was preparing this morning, that in 2024, you are either going to jump out the nest or God's going to push you out of the nest. I don't know who this is for. Maybe all of us. And once you are out of the nest and you are free falling, it is going to feel like you are failing. And in the middle of your failure, you're going to have an opportunity to stick out your wings and find out you can fly, or you're going to have an opportunity to wallow up in your own pain and hit the ground and die. It's going to be up to you. And most of us were taught and trained in some kind of technical skill of some sort. But almost none of us were ever taught how to fail. I'm teaching you, fail forward. Fail forward. Go fail. And in your failures, find success. I went in my closet late last night because I had this idea. I thought this was kind of neat. I still have the shoe. The exact shoe. Because y'all know me, I try not to get rid of shoes. I still have the exact shoe that got stuck in the mud. But you know what? You would never know this shoe got stuck in the mud. This thing was caked in the mud. It was like brown and caked in the mud. But you know what? It is nothing a washing machine can't take care of. You may be caked in the mud. You may feel like you have butchered everything and lost everything and made the biggest mistakes. You may feel caked in mud. But my goodness, if you can get into the washing machine of God's presence, the washing machine of the Spirit of God, if you can learn from those mistakes and keep moving forward, you can come back out looking like new. You may have a little bit of a scar here or there. You may have a little bit of a stain here and there, but you can walk out still looking brand new as far as all that matters. Stand up with me around the room if you would. There's some of you in this room, and you're a little bit different, but it's the same story, that you are the muddy shoe. You feel dirty. You feel gross. You feel so broken. In fact, you would never wear a shoe that's caked with mud probably into church, and you feel out of place because you know that your life is caked with mud and you feel like you shouldn't even be here. But I'm telling you, because I have experienced it along with people all over this room, that the blood of Jesus Christ and the forgiveness and grace of Jesus Christ can wash you new. And what used to be ugly and muddy can be white as snow. When you surrender your life to Christ and say, God, I give you my life, you are made new and reborn in Him. And the old is gone and the new is here. In fact, the shoe's not even the best example because you are reborn on the inside. You started anew. Would you bow your heads with me around the room? If you're here this morning and you say, Pastor, I need to give my life to Jesus. I want to surrender to Him. Then I want to pray for you in just a moment. But I want to give you an opportunity to express that. I won't embarrass you or call you out, but if you're in here and you say, Pastor, I want to give my life to Christ, I want to follow Him. If that's you, would you just stick your hand up and wave it at me so I can pray for you? Amen. 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 Come on, around the room, can you pray with us with me? Say, Jesus, I need you. And from this day forward, I surrender my life completely to you. Make me new, and I will follow you. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Come on. So good. So good. Listen, angels in heaven are celebrating even right now if you just gave your life to Christ. It's a beautiful thing. And I want to invite you, if you did, to text Jesus to the number on the screen. We'd love to send you a little devotional and start a relationship with you. You need community within this decision.
God is doing so much here at Arise Church, and we want you to be a part of it. Stay connected with us on our YouTube channel, Facebook, and Instagram, and wherever you can find us online at My Arise Church, and we'll see you next week.